Hello. How are you? Don't answer that. I can't hear you. Welcome to Only as Lonely. I'm Dan, and this is my podcast where I share my story of taking redundancy to go on an adventure, a solitary journey, travelling, taking photos, playing music, and all the little interactions in between. As always, photos, clips and songs will be available on onlyaslonely.wordpress.com to coincide with the release of these episodes, so I hope you're immersing yourself in the sights, the sounds and the story. It's day 6 in New York, my last full day, and I've already seen and experienced so much. If you've been with me throughout the journey so far, thank you. You're clearly committed to being a part of this, and for that, I am truly grateful. So it's my last day in New York, and there's still so many things I wanted to achieve. But do I achieve them? Well, let's not faff about. Let's just jump straight in and find out. Day 6, September the 14th, 2009. I woke up this morning and I felt knackered. I just wanted to chill out. I'd been moving at such a pace the past few days to make sure I'd see things and tick boxes that I felt like I'd worn myself out. But equally, there were still things to do. One of which was my laundry. I was misinformed that the laundrette was on 117th. It wasn't. It was on 116th. There I was, wandering around Harlem with a bag full of smelly pants. It was a good deterrent, I suppose, if anyone was considering mugging me. I found a rundown laundrette which was proper old school and very yellow. Yellow walls, yellow line-off floor tiles, and even the washing machines looked dated and yellow. There were odd seats outside, and I'd previously noticed old guys sitting and chilling out, no doubt putting the worlds to right. Inside was a little fella, and I asked him what I needed to do. Can I get a service wash, or do I do it myself? The way he looked at me, I could imagine him saying to himself the equivalent of, bloody foreigner. He said he'd sort it for me, and so I left my smelly pants and the rest of my laundry with him and headed back to the hostel to try to upload some pics to Facebook so that my friends and family could keep track of what was happening and be sure that I was still alive. The computers were pretty crap, so I only managed to upload a couple of pics. I got back to the laundrette and waited a while for my laundry while watching the TV that was perched high on a shelf. There was a cheesy morning TV show where a couple with incredible teeth, hair that looked like it contained enough hairspray to cause another hole in the ozone, and very, very tan skin presented segments for the day, with fake smiles and enthusiasm, and enough cheese to cause someone with an intolerance to dairy to flare up. They presented topical stories and were interviewing various people. It definitely lacked authenticity. I remember looking at the two presenters thinking, do they really like each other? I can imagine them not wanting to converse once the cameras stopped rolling, their faces dropping, aching from the Cheshire Cat smiles they'd been forcing all morning. After returning the now clean underpants to my room, I headed to Central Park. It was a crisp morning with the sun shining. Central Park is like a piece of countryside amongst the metropolis. It's an oasis. Peaceful, yet full of life. It's easy to lose yourself following the paths meandering between the green, but my belly was starting to rumble, so it was time to find a big breakfast somewhere. I left the park and headed west in search of a diner. On the way I found a phone box and called my nan. It was so good to speak to her and hear the joy in her voice. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my nan. So I was quite close to my nan. She was my father's mum. She was from Southern Ireland, Clonus in Monaghan, whereas my granddad was from Northern Ireland, Armagh, and he used to ride his bicycle across the border to see her. A time that was much less complicated with local communities, local news, and no need to know what some stranger is doing, eating or thinking from across the world, like today's addiction with social media. Granddad was 12 years older than my nan. Yeah, I know, yeah. And he was a very quiet, gentle soul. He was tall, very slim, and it's his bald gene that I've inherited. He was a generation that would wear a shirt and tie to go to the shops. I wish I'd known him better, but he didn't say much and when he did, unfortunately, with his soft, quiet, husky voice and strong Irish accent and no teeth, it proved a combination that meant I found it hard to understand him sometimes. I remember being a young boy and he'd say something, I'd apologise and ask him to repeat it. Then he would, and I still couldn't understand it. Sadly, the only thing I did understand him say was when he'd say, you can't understand me, never mind. I really wanted to. I wish I did. With him being hard of hearing as well, communication was tough. He'd been engaged before he met my nan, but for a reason I'll never know, it didn't work out and he became a bit of a drinker. It was when he met my nan that she sorted his drinking right out, and he'd always said that my nan had saved him. But at Christmas, if he'd had a tipple with the family, you could guarantee he'd love a sing-song and sing Danny Boy, while my nan would say, "Shut up, Bill, you're drunk." My granddad was very quiet when sober. My nan, however, she was very vocal. She made up for my granddad's silence. Everyone at church and everyone in the street knew who my nan and granddad were. My nan would always stop and say hello to anyone, ask how they are, laugh and joke with them. Her home was a sanctuary of peace, of safety, of love. I used to visit on Sunday, along with my Uncle John, his wife Lynn, and my cousins Richard and Emily, and my Auntie Rose with her husband Darren, and my cousins Nicola and Ben. But I used to enjoy staying for a while after they'd left and just watch the telly with my nan, enjoy the peace, and enjoying just being in the company of my nan because I knew she wouldn't be around forever. We'd watch I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, or what's that one, Dancing on Ice with the Stars, or whatever it's called. She was always honest. She'd say what she thought, and sometimes it might be a bit shocking to people, but that's a nan thing, I think. She wasn't particularly vocal in her affection. I can only remember she told me once that she loved me after I hugged her tight and told her that I loved her as I was leaving one Sunday evening. But she didn't have to tell me. I always knew. My father was not only estranged from me, he was also estranged from the rest of the family. So I felt like I had to step up and fill his space. Not that I ever could. I mean, he was the eldest of 4. But still, I felt it was important to be there for my nan, represent that part of the family wherever I could. She was worried about me heading off around the world, so I had to call her and let her know I was okay. "Ah, hello, Daniel." She sounded bright and happy to hear from me. "How are you?" Followed by, "Are you eating? What's the weather like? Are the people strange?" To hear her voice and connect with home for just a couple of minutes brightened up this already bright day some more. I'd give anything to be able to talk to her again. A few years ago, I had a dream with her in it, and it was so vivid. In the dream, I asked her what it was like to die. She told me that most people think that it's like going to sleep, but actually it's like waking up. That dream really stayed with me, and I know dreams are supposed to be our own subconscious, but you know, that message seemed too profound to have come from me, you know. And I'm not saying that my nan visited me in a dream. I don't know what I'm saying. But I like the idea of waking up rather than going to sleep. After speaking to Nan, I then called my mate Sam, who was still working at the old place and had been to New York only a week before. I called him at the office. I knew the number off the top of my head. We had joked that he should leave something in a secret place and I should try to find it. We didn't do that though. We had a banter for a few minutes and I felt myself again. It highlighted how so much of what makes us who we are and what makes us feel normal is dependent on the interaction we have with others. Taken out of the usual surroundings and placed in a different situation, alone and out of our comfort zone, we quickly see a different part of our character. I guess if the norm was a solitary existence, then to be with people for a time and then have a few minutes alone would be the reversal of what I was experiencing during that call. I guess what I'm trying to say is that for me to feel back to normal, I needed to have the interaction with my friends and family, the people who I'm able to drop my guard with and return to that weird and warped sense of humour. I then found Key West Diner. I sat in a booth. I thought I'd try somewhere different to the counter. It was very busy, so I thought, well, this must be a good place. I ordered the lumberjack breakfast. "How would you like your eggs?" asked the waitress. Now was the time to say it. The thing I'd heard on the telly but didn't know what it was. Over easy? My 2 eggs came. They were fried eggs that had just been flipped over for a few seconds. So not that amazing, really, nothing special. Yeah. The eggs came with 3 pancakes, sausages, ham and bacon, a proper pork fest and a vegan's nightmare. And of course, can't forget the free refill coffee, loving it. I was absolutely stuffed for the day, fully caffeined up, and for me, 3 meals a day of these portions was an impossibility. I couldn't eat 3 meals of this. This one meal would set me up for most of the day. So I took a stroll back to Central Park and fell in love with the place. It's so clean, so green and peaceful despite all the activity going on. It was a bit of a contradiction. New York City, Manhattan was alive. There was always something going on. It was a hive of activity and it never seemed still. There was never a moment where I could find myself in a quiet place without any sign of any other human being present. Unlike home. After 11 o'clock on a weeknight at home, the streets would be pretty quiet. Most people either at home watching telly or in bed. But not here. There were always cars driving around, and the nearer to Times Square, the more people there were about. But in Central Park, it felt different. There were still a lot of people around, but to me, it still seemed peaceful. It seems like everyone really appreciates it. Everyone who comes here just comes to decompress and breathe a little. I passed a group of young school kids climbing on big rocks with their teacher watching. I wandered down to one of the lakes and started to stroll around it. Every now and again, I'd be passed by a jogger or someone having a fast walk. Let's be honest, not the most masculine looking activities, is it? Speed walking. Now I understand that this day and age, that would probably be labelled as toxic masculinity. But not exactly a good spectator sport, is it? You know, who came up with that as a sport? The aim is to get from A to B as quick as you can using your legs. Oh, right, running. No, you can't run. No, you got to walk. You got to restrain yourself from running, and you can only walk in a very funny, weird way, swinging those hips. That's guaranteed to be unattractive to members of the opposite sex. Imagine meeting someone and they tell you that they're a professional athlete, and then you're immediately impressed by that. You think, oh, hello. You're intrigued. Maybe you're a little bit more attracted to them. But when they tell you it's speed walking, you can't tell me that you maintain the same level of enthusiasm and admiration. If you want to watch speed walking, just watch people in an office dash to the loo after the first coffee of the day. I put some Jack Johnson on my iPod and felt so relaxed, smiling with the sunlight flickering at my face through the leaves and branches. So many people hanging out, enjoying the green surroundings, and yet it never seemed crowded, probably because Central Park is absolutely massive. I continued to stroll around the lakes with people in rowing boats. I saw fountains and bridges, horse-drawn carriages and cyclists, skaters and people just chilling out. I got my camera out and took some photos of a guy called Wagner from Puerto Rico. I don't know if I've pronounced that right. Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico. There we go. Puerto Rico. He was doing flips and jumps on his skateboard. I took his email address and promised to send him the photos. I took some photos under a bridge and took a photo of a guy in a bowler hat ascending some steps. I was above him on the bridge at the time and noticed how the sun was casting a long shadow behind him. It was an impulse shot, but one that I knew that I'd be proud of. He looked so retro in his bowler hat. I was thinking that in sepia this shot could have been taken in any time. I had no sense of time apart from being mindful that it wasn't important right now. I strolled at an easy pace, taking it all in. I continued with God knows how many others, like ants swarming around this oasis of greenery, slap bang in the middle of concrete and glass. I walked past a small film crew filming something. Then I found an ice cream vendor. I mean, he was no ice cream man like yesterday. He wasn't going to solve any of my problems. Never mind. I took the ice cream and sat on a huge field. Baseball pitches nearby where others were sitting, throwing balls, catching rays and relaxing. I lay on the grass after enjoying my ice cream with my rucksack as a pillow and closed my eyes, listening to my iPod and thinking that I was the most relaxed I had been in a long time. I let my mind drift. I thought about home. I thought about Scruff. I thought about the journey ahead. I thought about what I'd seen and what I'd felt and what I'd done just in the first 5-6 days. But what was there to worry about now, in this present moment? Nothing. It was a nirvana moment for me. After maybe an hour, I started walking again, and no surprise, I got lost. I was always getting lost. I ended up pretty much where I'd started a few hours ago. Great, I thought. I headed back in the right direction and found a call box. See, I'm using the lingo now as well, call box. Not a phone, it's a call box. I called my friend Kelly, who I'd promised to call from New York. It was good to make her laugh as I told her about my newfound superpower to find the gay scene and the Museum of Modern Shite. I then stumbled upon the chess area. It comprised of many stone tables all laid out in a circle, and engraved in the tables were chessboards. There were a few old guys playing against each other, and I watched them for a while. There were still things I had to see, but I thought, you know what, stuff it. I was just going to once again enjoy the present moment as the early evening sun cast golden beams across the park and into this circle of stone tables. I asked a couple of old guys if I could take their picture. They said no. Okay. I wasn't going to take it if they didn't want me to. As I wandered around the tables, seeing the different games going on, I saw a new game beginning between an old black guy with his sports cap, big white beard and scruffy attire, playing a much younger black guy who was in a smart jacket. He had these cool little round glasses and a hat that could have been worn by a gondolier. I don't know what you call that hat. I could have just Googled it, couldn't I? I could see the concentration in the old guy's face as he was working out his options, his tactics, the possible counters depending on the many possible moves that his opponent could deliver. I had to get a picture. I wasn't going to disturb them and ask. I didn't want to lose this moment. I wanted it to be a candid shot, and also I didn't want the rejection of a no. So I moved away, fitted my larger zoom lens, and took a couple of shots of this man who was so engrossed in the game that he was oblivious to the outside world, it seemed. He was in his own little bubble within this green bubble of Central Park. I was so pleased with the shots I got. I managed to capture the concentration and deep thought on the old guy's face. When I eventually left Central Park, I took notice of the time and realised I'd actually spent about 7 hours there. So I headed downtown, grabbed a bite, and as the sun was getting low, I headed to the Rockefeller Center to head for the top of the rock, again courtesy of the New York Pass. After queuing, bag checks and metal detectors, I got into the lift and headed up to the top. When I got to the top, there were already many people all taking photos. The view was fantastic. Unlike the Empire State Building, there were no cages or framework obstructing your vision. Instead, there were thick panes of glass. You could see everything. Looking back uptown, it dawned on me just how big Central Park was from up there. The Empire State Building, which was downtown, looked fantastic as it was lit up by yellow spotlights. You could see the water either side of Manhattan, and in the distance, Brooklyn Bridge, and in the far distance, the Statue of Liberty. It was dusk, and the colour of the sky was beautiful. Purples, pinks, and reds to the west, fading into black to the east over Manhattan. There was the odd flash from the Empire State Building as people were taking photos from up there, their flashes being absolutely pointless. Fortunately, with an SLR, you can increase the sensitivity of the sensor to the light, the trade-off being that the more sensitive to light, the more grainy the images can become. But it was a trade-off to achieve enough of an exposure at a fast enough speed to prevent camera shake and a blurry image. Photography is a balancing act of available light, shutter speed, exposure, and depth of field. The lights. There were so many. It would have taken forever to count them. I made my way to the highest point on the tower and stood there overlooking the Empire State Building and downtown Manhattan. I could make out the start of Times Square. I took some photos and then stood there listening to my iPod. I put the only New York song I knew I had by Richard Ashcroft. It's not my favourite song, but it was suitable for the moment. I think I listened to it 3 or 4 times, just taking in the view of this iconic city in front of me. It was a special moment for me. The wind on my face, the soundtrack to the moment, the incredible view of the Big Apple below me. Equally, it was another moment where I looked around and saw people sharing this experience with someone. Oh well, nothing I could do about it. But I just decided to keep my mind on the view and the music and enjoy yet another nirvana moment that was all mine. It was unlikely that there was anyone else experiencing what I was experiencing, how I was experiencing it in that moment. The music helped me to make it special because only I could hear the music, and I wasn't being disturbed or caught up in the commotion of 100 other tourists. I'd completely zoned them out. I could have quite easily have sat there in a deck chair with a cold beer and just take it all in for the evening. But I couldn't stay there all night. And so after a while, I decided to head on and headed to Radio City, a famous music hall with its bright lights, its name wrapping around the building and vertically on huge signs on the front and side of the building. Aretha Franklin was due to perform on the 17th and 18th of September, and her name and the dates were also in bright lights. The colours of the bright pink letters and the bright blue trim of the signs were striking, and it seemed to complement the lines of headlights and taillights of passing cars over a crosswalk when I took the photos of the long exposure setting. After taking some shots there, I headed to Times Square as my last opportunity to get some more long exposures. I had a beer at the Hard Rock Cafe where Kelly had told me it would be a guarantee that I'd be able to get chatting with someone there. It didn't happen. Everyone there was busy chatting to others. There was no inroad. Quite sad, really. I was looking around trying to see if I could make eye contact with someone. Anyone. Just to be able to strike up a conversation today. I hadn't spoken to anyone in 3D today. Everyone was so engrossed in their own conversations, it wasn't going to happen. So I sat at the bar, drinking my Budweiser and watching the TV screens with music videos of various big-haired rock stars in tight jeans from the 80s doing their thing. I headed back to base. As usual, during my time in the city, my feet were sore and my legs tired from all the walking by the end of the day. I was to share my room with Dave, an Irish fella from Galway. He had big hair, a big beard, and a big love of music along with a big friendly personality. This was just a stop-off while he was heading to New Orleans. We didn't chat for long as we were both knackered, but it was like talking to someone from home again. And I was grateful. At last, I'd managed to speak to somebody in 3D. It was funny as the boys down in the large room were being a bit rowdy. "What's all that feckin' noise about?" asked Dave. "Get used to it, mate. That's why I've got earplugs." "Feck that!" Dave gets up, stomps off in his underpants down the corridor, and I hear him say, "Lads, keep it down, will ye? I'm trying to sleep." I don't think the lad spoke much English, let alone understand the Irish twang, but it must have been a bit daunting when out of the darkness comes a jibber-jabbering foreign man with big hair, a big beard, and crazy eyes in his Y-fronts. Made no difference, though. "Feck!" moaned Dave as he rolled over on the bottom bunk. I just stuck my earplugs in and nodded off. And that's day 6, my last full day in New York. So looking at this episode, I think I was just surrendering to the fact that I was on my own now and not trying to resist it so much. I mean, that said, I did speak to my nan and speak to my pal, Sam and Kelly that day, but, I think I was starting to get a bit more comfortable with, just being on my own and going with the flow. And I think today was certainly a day where I wasn't putting pressure on myself to see things and do things. I recognised that I was tired. I'd already done a lot of stuff and I just needed a rest. So today was going to be a rest. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I felt like Central Park was a really special place. Especially when there was just no negative vibes. I felt safe. It felt relaxed. Everybody was just doing their own thing. You didn't feel like anyone was taking any notice of anyone else. And it just felt like people were really enjoying this green space. They don't have a lot of green space, on Manhattan. And yet here we are, where I live, and not far from me, there are fields and parks. And does everybody really enjoy that? I don't know if people recognise what they've got in front of them sometimes. I do. I like going for a walk. I like enjoying outdoor spaces with the other half. I like taking her to nice places, nice countryside places, seeing if she can find a way home. So it's good. But yeah, so that was that day. Again, I tried to see if I could speak to somebody in the Hard Rock Cafe. Kelly said, yeah, you'll definitely talk to somebody in the Hard Rock Cafe. Someone will definitely speak to you. No, they didn't. Never mind. That's okay. Just kind of took it in my stride. But at least I got to speak to Dave in his Y front. Dave from Galway. Not much in the way of funny interactions today. It went a little bit deep. And I'm sorry about that. When I talked about my nan and granddad and that dream and all that, I just kind of just felt like I just wanted to open up about that. Really, my nan was really important to me, and I was very close to her. And it was important that I spoke to her. So I just felt like I wanted to share that with you. Really, I think everybody should have a nan like that, shouldn't they? We all lose people, don't we? One day, hopefully, we'll wake up and maybe they'll be there. Thank you very much for sticking with this. Thank you for being with me and sharing this journey with me through New York. We're going to New Zealand next. If you know anybody who you think would like this, would be interested in the travelling side, if they like photography, if they like music, if they like funny little interaction with people, then please, by all means, share this with them. If you share it with one person, if all of you share with one person, that will increase listenership by 100%. So we could get it up to 8 people. So that'd be good, wouldn't it? Follow on onlyaslonely.wordpress.com as well. But next episode, tomorrow, I am going to New Zealand. And so that might be a 2 days in one thing. I'm not sure how that will play out. We'll have to see. So join me in episode 7. Come with me to New Zealand. I'll show you around. I look forward to it. Thank you for listening. Take care. Bye-bye. Feck.